"You have 48 hours to leave," Julian said, eyes fixed somewhere over my shoulder. "My real mom is moving in." At first, I thought I'd misheard. The words settled slowly like dust after a door slams. He stood by the doorway in his pressed shirt and polished shoes, shoulders, stiff voice, rehearsed. I'd never heard him sound so formal, so final. We were standing in the kitchen. The same kitchen where he surprised me 3 years ago with a bottle of sparkling cider and a deed to the house saying, "You've taken care of me long enough, Mom. Let me take care of you now." I gripped the edge of the counter. "She's my birth mother," he added softer, almost like an excuse. "We reconnected 6 months ago. She's changed. She deserves a second chance. Changed deserves. She's been through a lot," he continued, "and I think it's time I get to know her properly. This place, she needs it." I didn't ask questions, didn't argue. I didn't remind him of the nights I stayed up by his hospital bed after his tonsil surgery, or the time I drove across the state for his forgotten science fair project. I didn't ask if he remembered who filled out his college applications, or who held him when he first got his heart broken. I just nodded. "If that's what you've decided," I said, folding the dish towel over the oven handle, "then I'll go." He hesitated. "I know this isn't easy." No, it wasn't. But I smiled anyway, the kind of smile that makes people think you're fine when you're already halfway gone. He left soon after. I stood in the empty kitchen, the refrigerator humming like it didn't care either way. And when the silence settled in, I finally moved. I opened the drawer in the hallway, the one he never noticed. Inside was a folder I'd been adding to for weeks, thin, neat, and heavy, with the kind of truth no one asks for. I turned on the lamp and started reading again. Her name is Eloise. That's how Julian introduced her, like she'd been waiting just off stage all these years. He showed me a photo, first creased at the corners like it had been folded and refolded too many times. In it, she stood in front of a tree, one hand on her hip, the other resting on what might have been a bench. I didn't recognize the tree, or the smile. "She wrote me first," he said. "Said she's been trying to find me for years." Then came the call. I overheard it from the hallway, her voice warm, syrupy, a little too rehearsed. The kind of voice that knows how to ask and how to collect. By the following week, she was here. Eloise moved quickly. She laughed too loud, complimented the curtains, then made herself tea without asking where I kept things. She never brought up the orphanage, or why she left, or how Julian ended up in the system in the first place. She touched his arm often, always called him my son, like the words had been waiting in her mouth too long. Julian soaked it in. I watched from the far side of the room. At dinner, she leaned in too close, asked what kind of investments Julian held, if he had life insurance, if the house was fully paid. She wrapped these questions in soft words and maternal glances. Julian didn't notice, but I did. That night after the dishes were done and they went upstairs to look through old photos, my photos, I unlocked the drawer in my bedroom and took out the folder. Not the one I'd left for Julian. A second one. Inside were printouts, notes, a timeline, copies of public records, a page from an old newspaper. I flipped through it slowly, confirming what I'd suspected weeks ago. Eloise wasn't Eloise. Her name had changed 6 times in the past 15 years. Her last known alias appeared on a fraud case in Nevada, sealed but not invisible. I packed light. 2 bags. Enough clothes for a few weeks, the essentials, and a copy of the documents I couldn't trust to leave behind. I cleaned the kitchen like I always did, wiping down the counters, rinsing out the sink, straightening the dish towels. Only this time, I moved slower. Every motion had weight. It wasn't the task itself. It was what came after. On the counter, I placed the envelope. Thick. Sealed. Labeled in my handwriting, for Julian. I didn't leave a note. No explanations. Just the facts. Inside, he'd find the name Darlene Rivas, printed across court filings and arrest records. A woman who'd once called herself Eloise, and before that, Carla. Before that, something else entirely. She had 6 known aliases, had drifted through 4 states over the past 15 years. 2 former charges, both dismissed for insufficient evidence. But the pattern was there. Always the same story: a woman reconnects with her long-lost child. The child, often adopted now, stable and successful, opens their life and their finances. The woman asks for help. The child obliges. Then within months, the lies start unraveling if they're lucky enough to notice. I had timelines printed, screenshots from old social media accounts, bank transfers, a copy of the DNA result she'd shown Julian, and my own lab report proving it was doctored. I didn't expect him to believe it right away. Maybe not ever. But I knew how truth works. It waits. I placed the keys on the hook by the door. Same place they'd always been. The house was his. He made that clear. But what he did with the truth, well, that was his choice too. I stepped out into the cold evening air, pulled the door shut behind me, and walked down the porch steps without looking back. At the end of the block, I turned left toward the motel with flickering lights and a front desk that didn't ask too many questions. My reservation was under a name I hadn't used in years. The motel was 10 minutes from the house, but it felt like another country. I checked in under the name Margaret Wells. It wasn't on any file Julian would recognize. I paid in cash, turned off my phone, and tucked it into the drawer next to the motel Bible. The room was small, clean enough, and quiet. I didn't unpack. I pulled out my laptop instead and connected to the Wi-Fi using the network name that blinked "Welcome Guests" like I belonged. I didn't think about the adoption paperwork, not in detail. Just flashes. The gray carpet in the agency waiting room. The social worker who never made eye contact. Julian's hand in mine, small, tight, trusting. I remembered how he used to press his forehead against my arm when he was scared, like it grounded him. But I didn't let myself stay there. I searched court dockets next. Property records. Civil complaints. I ran Darlene's known aliases through every database I had access to, legal or otherwise. By midnight, I had names. 3 adults, all adopted as children, each of them successful, generous, and recently estranged from the families who raised them. 2 men. 1 woman. All 3 had cut off contact shortly after Darlene appeared in their lives. 1 man, Thomas Gentry, had even transferred a property deed to her name, then filed to revoke it 3 months later. He'd lost. The signature was his. The court didn't care about how he'd been manipulated into signing it. I printed everything. Set the documents in chronological order. I highlighted similarities in her language, emails, text messages, handwritten notes she'd left behind. The story never changed. Just the names and the cities. I ordered a burner phone online, prepaid. No questions asked. Then I typed out a short email to someone I hadn't contacted in years, a private investigator named Ellis Vargas. We'd worked together a long time ago on a probate case involving a forged will. He was sharp, discreet, and unshakable. The message was simple. I need help. Same rules. I hit send and closed the laptop. In the stillness of the room, the printer spat out the last page. He found it that morning. The envelope sat where the fruit bowl used to be, its weight and thickness impossible to ignore. At first, Julian moved right past it, annoyed. He was looking for the coffee filters. But the bold, unmistakable handwriting stopped him mid-reach. For Julian. He sighed, thinking it was a guilt letter. Some dramatic farewell. He wasn't in the mood for sentiment. But when he opened it, there was no letter at all. Just pages, documents, screenshots. The first few meant nothing to him. Court docket numbers, property transfers, a grainy photo of a woman in sunglasses outside a post office. He was about to toss the whole thing when one line caught his eye. He's special, but fragile. He needs someone who understands blood ties. He'd heard those exact words. Darlene had whispered them during their third dinner together, her hand on his wrist. He flipped to the next page. Another email. Same phrasing. Different recipient. Then came the logs. Names. Bank transactions. Wire transfers. Each sheet chipped away at something he hadn't realized was already cracked. By the 5th page, he was sitting down. By the 10th, he couldn't breathe. When he finally confronted her, Darlene didn't yell. She wept. Said I had always hated her, always undermined her. Said the paperwork was fake. Said Julian was all she had. She's not your real mother, Darlene said softly. She never accepted that I came back for you. She's punishing me. Julian wanted to believe her. He really did. But now he remembered how quickly she'd moved in. How she'd insisted he update his will. How she joked about tying things up legally just last week. And how I had never once asked him to choose. I turned on my phone for the first time in days. The burner had done its job quiet, clean, untraceable. But I needed to check the original. Just for a moment. Just to see. As soon as it powered on, it rang. Julian. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering. Then I answered. His voice was quiet. Mom? I didn't say anything. He exhaled shaky. You knew. Didn't you? Yes, I said. But you needed to see it yourself. There was a long pause. I could hear him shifting, maybe pacing. I don't even know what to say. You don't have to, I said. I just wanted you safe. That's always been the point. Another silence, heavier this time. She said you were trying to break us apart. That you never accepted her. I didn't need to accept or reject her, Julian. I just followed the paper trail. His voice cracked. I didn't want to believe it. I know. Where are you? He asked. I didn't answer. He didn't press. I'm sorry, he said after a moment. For the things I said. For making you leave. For not asking questions when I should have. I could hear the apology in his voice, not just in the words, but in the way he said my name. Like it meant something again. I have a lot to fix, he said. I didn't tell him to hurry. I didn't tell him what to do next. That was the part he had to figure out on his own. I'm glad you called, I said. Even if it took a while. He breathed out again, this time slower. I'll be in touch soon. I have some things to handle. I ended the call gently and sat still for a long while. Then I reached for the folder on the table now, twice as thick as when I first packed it. It was time to call Ellis again. Ellis looked older. A little grayer around the edges, but still sharp. He spread the papers across the motel table like we were building a puzzle neither of us wanted to finish. She slipped up, he said, tapping a printed court document. There's a sealed indictment from Nevada embezzlement and wire fraud. It was dormant for years, then reopened last month when a victim resurfaced. Does she know I asked? He shook his head. Doubt it. She's using a new alias again, different bank accounts, same method. I nodded. None of it surprised me anymore. What did surprise me was how quickly Julian got involved once he knew. He sent me everything. Voicemails, screenshots, recordings of conversations where her words didn't line up. In one, she told him she'd never lived in Nevada. In another, she mentioned working at a wellness center in Reno for a short time. She'd forgotten what she'd claimed just days before. The texts were worse. Long, syrupy messages about family love connection, followed by carefully worded nudges about transferring assets, joint accounts, planning for the future. But it was the DNA test that did it. Julian forwarded me the original copy she'd shown him, complete with a fancy-looking seal and lab credentials. Ellis tracked the clinic name. It didn't exist. Or rather, it did, but it had been shut down 3 years ago for licensing violations. The doctor listed on the report had never been board certified. Ellis cross-referenced signatures and dates. The entire document was forged. She used a shell clinic, he said. Created a fake domain. It's sophisticated more than most scams I've seen. I looked down at the printout. Julian's face flashed in my mind, hopeful, proud, betrayed. He hadn't said much after we uncovered the DNA fraud. Just one message: I need to sit with this. His anger wasn't loud anymore. It had settled into something quieter, heavier. I handed Ellis a flash drive with everything we had so far. Can you get this to the right people? He nodded. Already started. And I knew then we were almost done. Julian didn't tell me what day she was leaving. He just sent a short message. It's done. Later, Ellis filled in the rest. The authorities in Nevada agreed not to issue an immediate warrant if she left the state within 48 hours. Extradition could wait. They wanted her calm, not cornered. She was served, warned, and escorted to the airport by the very man she'd tried to erase. Julian drove her himself. There was no conversation on the way. She sat in the passenger seat like a stranger looking out the window, as if searching for some version of herself that might have earned forgiveness. He didn't offer it. She tried to speak once, some half-hearted apology, maybe a plea, but the words never made it past her lips. Julian didn't flinch, didn't look over. At the terminal, she hesitated. He stayed in the car. When she finally turned and walked inside, she didn't look back. The house was empty again. Julian didn't go back right away. He sent me a photo the next morning, the front door closed, the porch light still on. He called. I let it ring twice before answering. I want you to come home, he said. It's quiet here, cold, and wrong. I'm fine where I am, I said gently. I know, but I'm not. There was a silence, then something fuller than words. I'm not the same, he added. I believed him, but something inside me held still. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. After we hung up, I walked outside the motel room, stood on the cracked pavement under a sky just beginning to turn. The folder was gone now, in Ellis's hands, with the right people doing what it needed to do. All that remained was choice. The kind that didn't ask who was wrong first or who said sorry better. The kind that asked what, now 3 weeks passed, before I unlocked the door again. Julian had left everything untouched. The living room still smelled faintly of that citrus wood cleaner I used every Saturday morning. The couch pillows sat exactly where I fluffed them last. And in the kitchen, clean quiet, waiting the hook by the door still held the keys. I didn't speak right away. I walked through each room slowly like I was visiting someone else's memories. Julian stayed a step behind, saying nothing. He didn't try to explain or apologize again. He just let me move. In the kitchen, I put water on the stove. I knew where the mugs were. My hand found them without needing to look. He sat at the table, watching. Not with the nervous energy I remembered, but something softer now. Worn down, maybe. Or grown up. I don't expect you to forget it, he said quietly. Any of it. I turned, met his eyes. I haven't decided whether to forgive it either. He nodded once. Forgiveness isn't a door, I said. It's a hallway. Some days you move forward. Some days you don't. I'll wait, he said. I'm not asking you to. I know. The kettle whistled high and sharp, and I poured the water into 2 cups, watching the steam rise. I set one in front of him. No milk, 1 sugar, just like always. We sat there for a while, sipping, not talking. Eventually, he stood and stepped out to the backyard, giving me space. The screen door creaked closed behind him. I looked around again. At the sunlight on the counter. At the empty spot where the envelope had once sat. And at the hook by the door where the keys had always lived. They never left. And neither really had I. I took a deep breath, walked over, and unhooked them. The paperwork arrived in a manila envelope, clean and final. Julian stood on the porch as I opened it. He didn't offer a speech, just said, "It's yours now. Officially." I had the deed transferred. I looked at the pages. His name had been removed, mine added. Witnessed, notarized, filed. I didn't ask why. I knew. Not as a gift. Not as compensation. It was an apology written in legal terms. I signed it. Not because I needed the house. I had already lived in it as both guest and owner in all but title. But signing it gave shape to the end of something, and maybe the beginning of something else. The drawer in my study now holds the full investigation file. Every name, every document, every printed message. I keep it not to revisit the betrayal, but to remember what silence once protected and what vigilance uncovered. I don't open it often, but I know it's there. Julian visits most Sundays, sometimes with groceries, sometimes with nothing but his own awkward presence. He doesn't ask what I need. He doesn't assume. He helps me trim the hedges, replaces the light on the porch without being asked, brings back my tea from the market even though I never told him which kind I prefer. We sit in the backyard some days, talk about nothing, weather, headlines, books neither of us plans to read. Other days we sit in silence. I no longer expect the version of him I once knew. That boy is gone, and maybe so is the woman I was when I raised him. But there's something here now, a new version. Without promises, without pretending. He still calls me Mom. Not every time, but enough that it doesn't sting when he doesn't. And when he leaves, he always says goodbye, not just with words, but with a glance. A pause, a hand resting briefly on my shoulder. It's not repair. It's not redemption, but it's real. And that's something I've learned to keep.